Handle high stress situations in life? And do you find yourself getting just overwhelmed at times? In high stress situations, more often than not, people find themselves ramping up. And when their emotions ramp up, their rational thinking tends to diminish, and they tend to do things that they would never have done if they were thinking clearly. Well, in this Lessons for Life video, what we want to do is to talk about how emotions can hijack our brains and even our bodies, and how we can learn to find out what God's word would say about mastering our emotions and handling things in a more God-honoring way in this next Lessons for Life video. Well, hello, my name is James Long Jr., and welcome to Lessons for Life. I am a pastor, board certified professional counselor, a university professor. I have over 30 years of helping people identify God's solutions for their problems. And we make these educational videos on the topic of mental, emotional, and relational health. And we do it from a biblical perspective. And today we're building off of our relational wisdom principles, the study created by Ken Sandy. As I told you, I am an advanced instructor for his program. And today we want to talk about emotions can hijack our brains and hijack our body. And so what happens in these high stress situations, our emotions can overwhelm our rational thinking. What tends to happen is this: in the back part of your brain, that's where data comes in. Data comes into your brain in the back part of your brain. And it's in the middle part of your brain where you actually start to feel in the limbic system. But it's not until you get to the frontal part of your brain where you start to think rationally. In the thalamus, you'll receive, that's a portion of your brain, you'll receive information. It may be sights or sound or touch or smell or taste, whatever it is. And that influences your amygdala. It's another portion of your brain. And that will cause you to either decide to fight, flight, or freeze. So, I'm going to fight you right now. Flight, I'm going to take off, or I'm going to freeze, I'm going to panic. And a series of emotions are triggered. In our last video, we talked about the 8 core emotions. It could be anger and sadness, fear, enjoyment, surprise, disgust, shame, whatever it may be, your emotions are triggered. And what ends up happening then is that you begin to analyze the sights and the sound and all those other things from your stored memory. And that's happening in another portion of your brain. Finally, it gets to that portion of your brain, the neocortex. And that's where you start to think logically and reasoning and all the sensory interpretations and conscious thoughts and language, all of that. And the motor commands come from that section. And so it's this big race for control. Who's going to control you? The limbic system, your emotions, or your rational portion of your brain? Now, man's fall into sin has so corrupted our brain's ability to work perfectly as God designed it. What happens, we talked about this in our last video, the noetic effects of sin, that when data enters our brain through our thalamus, what ends up happening is it sends impulses to other portions of the brain. And because of our sin nature, we have a tendency to react in sinful ways. In Genesis chapter 4, when Cain got angry, he rose up against his brother and he killed him. And David in 2 Samuel chapter 11, when he saw Bathsheba, he desired her in his heart and he took her. And so what ends up happening is this, that oftentimes we will get triggered and we will respond physically, and we will also respond out of our spiritual nature. And the hijacking can happen, and these strong emotions that trigger us can cause impulsive reactions. But those impulsive reactions may be quickly regretted. I'm wondering if David ever thought about it. It's like, what in the world did I do? Or maybe Cain, after he killed his brother, what in the world did I do? See, the downward spiral of the emotional hijacking and the flooding will lead to relational failure. Hijacking is interesting. Hijacking occurs when the emotions in our amygdala overpower the rational thinking in our neocortex. And so instead of being driven by rational thought and godly thoughts, we are driven by our emotions. Flooding is a sense where we feel repeatedly swamped by our own emotions, but also the emotions of others. And we can find ourselves feeling that way oftentimes. Now, triggers happen because we find this triggering process. I want you to think about this pattern. You get triggered, and maybe because of poor communication, misunderstanding, conflicting agendas, whatever it may be. Our natural tendency when we get defensive is that we tend to react, and we will tend to react to criticism. Now, it may be sarcasm, anger, silence, fight, whatever it may be. And we begin to see ourselves as this innocent victim, or at least an unappreciated victim. And we develop this tendency, this critical spirit within, and we assume the worst about other people. You probably have done it. I know I have. And we grab at evidence that will support our beliefs, and we ignore evidence that doesn't. So I will grab at evidence that supports the belief that you're a jerk, but I don't focus on the things that maybe I'm the one that's wrong. And this puts the other person in this relationship in a no-win situation. And in essence, I think it's a win-lose. I'm winning, you're losing, but it's actually a lose-lose situation. And what happens is that the more that happens in our lives, we have this prolonged physical distress. Our pulse rate increases, adrenaline increases, our respiration doesn't work well. And if that intensity happens long enough, this is what happens inevitably, that if the intensity happens, watch what happens here. We feel increasingly confused or frustrated or out of control. And as our emotions intensify, the limbic system is pulling oxygen away from our neocortex, where we think rationally, and where we have less of a capacity to rationally think, and we become increasingly difficult to recover from. We feel hurt, we feel angry, we lose hope over and over again, and we develop this hard heart towards other people. We can develop this uncaring heart. Maybe you've been there. And we see it partly as protection, but the other part of it is we're trying to really punish them, if we're being honest. And we avoid the person. We spend more time away from them. And we find ourselves giving up relationships. We give up friendships. We give up churches. We give up jobs. We give up marriages. Now, I don't want to be too stereotypical, but men and women tend to react a certain way. Oftentimes, men tend to avoid the conflict, and oftentimes because they're afraid of the emotional flooding. But women, on the other hand, talk oftentimes about we need to engage, we need to talk. And the fear of flooding causes the men to stonewall, to put up this wall of silence. And women, on the other hand, press even more. And so they're going to press, the woman is going to press to go into this relationship. The man is going to avoid and pull away. And this results in further frustration, further flooding, and a downward spiral. And there's this threefold pattern that happens in relationships. And when you could see relational failure, it tends to happen in these three ways. Number one, there's a failure to understand and faithfully obey God's instructions. So we don't understand God's instructions, or we're not even obeying them. We're just kind of running through the stop sign, running through the red lights. That's number one. Number two is a failure to understand and to consistently control the emotions and interests that are driving us. You know, it's not just that we fail to understand God's desires. I fail to understand, or you fail to understand your own emotions or your own interest. And then there's a third thing. We fail to understand and wisely engage the emotions and interest of others. We don't even think about other people. We don't think about God. We don't understand or evaluate ourselves, and we do not think and understand and evaluate others. Are you tired of being controlled? Like an invisible puppeteer yanking you back and forth, jerking you around, provoking you with words? Well, that invisible puppeteer is part of your physical nature, but it's also part of the spiritual nature that is happening within you. And I want you to know that there's hope. And as you grow in relational wisdom, as you learn to anticipate, you can learn to prevent, you can learn to reverse the spiral, the downward spiral, and you can be skilled at mastering yourself. You can become skilled at mastering and building healthy relationships and doing it in such a way that honors God. Well, I hope that was helpful to you. If it was, I want you to do me a favor and just like this video. And I would love it if you would subscribe to our channel. And if you know somebody that would benefit from it, I would love it if you would share that with them. I'll end with this. We offer a 3-level membership here at Lessons for Life. We have a membership level where you'd get a lot of content. We put out content on our videos. We put out content on our blogs, but this would be additional content that you would have, private content on a private server, and you would be able to get content, and it's an ever-growing library. And then if you would go into that level of membership, you would also get the benefit of being part of our community. I love community. I think people come for the content, but I really think that they will stay for the community, being able to connect with other people that have some of the same struggles. Well, there's a second level of membership. It's right in the middle, and we call it our Lessons for Life group coaching program. Lesson for Life group coaching program. And it takes all the content of the first level and it takes the community of the first level, but what it adds is 2 monthly coaching meetings. And I do some group coaching calls. I'll do some trainings on those. Other times I will do a Q&A session where I'll take 60 to 90 minutes of just doing Q&A sessions. Other times I'll invite guests, and it's a really beneficial thing for you. So I would encourage you to consider that. Our top level membership is what we call our Time for Change course and coaching program. Now, our Time for Change course is a 5-module, 28-lesson course, and it walks you through the change process, how you learn to grow and go step by step through the change process. But added to that, so you get all the content and the coaching from the first level, you get the group coaching from the second level, but you get the flagship course from the third level. And in fact, the cost of that monthly is less than one 45-minute counseling session. Now, it doesn't replace counseling, but we will have this opportunity for content, community, coaching, and our course. I hope that was helpful. I pray that God works in you richly by his grace and for his glory. Blessings. We'll see you next time. Take care.